Power and politics, power and sports, power and finances, the stock market right now, power, education. We live in a world where it's all about power, accumulating power, acquiring power, exerting power. And it's not bad. There's nothing wrong inherently with power. Power is energy, but all day, every day, we're bombarded with this concept that I don't even think most of us talk about. What is power? What does it mean to have it? What does it mean to live it? What is authentic power? And how do I experience that in my life in general, and especially in the afternoon of life?
So we want to welcome you to Soul Centered, and especially to this podcast, Own Your Power podcast, brought to you by Soul Centered, which is a spiritual center for anyone seeking meaning, purpose, and healing in the afternoon of life, and the afternoon of life meaning midlife and beyond. My name is Ariella Halevi, and I am the co-founder and the healer of Soul Centered, and your guide and your healer in the afternoon of life. And
I am Baruch Halevi, also known as B, and I am your guide to and through the afternoon of life.
so, what is the afternoon of life? We'll just touch on that for a moment. Carl Jung really coined the phrase. There's life is divided into two halves, the morning of life and the afternoon of life. And the morning of life has different rules, tools, and ways of being. And the afternoon of life is a completely different phase. And so what we do together is we help you find those new rules, tools, and transformational moments in the afternoon of life, which is so different. Basically, what Carl Jung says and what we've adapted into our program is that if you've done the things that you've done in the morning of life will not help you in the afternoon of life.
In many ways, they'll hurt you, and there's nothing more constructive and destructive than power. And we have to learn what it is and where it comes from and how we use it. And that's today's conversation. We're calling it authentic power in the afternoon of life. So let's get into it.
All right. Just as a little side note, if you are listening and going to listen to the whole video here and the whole podcast, we are going to kind of be talking about at the end our Own Your Power immersion, which is happening January 18th for 7 days. And we're going to discuss that a little bit more in depth at the end of our video. So stay tuned.
But even if you're listening after we do it live, you can get it recorded, and it's our gift to you. So yes, let's talk about power, maybe not authentic power, in particularly the morning of life. So again, morning of life, first half of life, but just because we're now in the second half of life doesn't mean you necessarily have graduated. That's a conscious choice in many ways. The first half of life is our society. We live in a morning of life society. What does that mean? It's about pursuit, acquiring, becoming, achieving, accumulating, lots of different things, lots of different ways, but the answer is always outside of ourself. I think that, for me at least, defines the morning of life.
I think it's true. And I think when you were talking about authentic power in the morning and the afternoon of life, there are two different definitions. Like you said, the morning of life is about the power you acquire. But I think it's also a feminine and masculine conversation, because the masculine energy, not male, female, but masculine, is really, truly the stuff outside of you. It's acquiring. And it is similar to the feminine acquiring and being in your power, but it comes from a different place.
It's important. That's an important distinction. And there's nothing wrong and everything right with the morning of life. Carl Jung's point wasn't that we shouldn't have a morning of life. It was that what got you here won't get you there. What worked in the morning will ultimately fail you in the afternoon. We need the morning of life and what it brings. So, for instance, we need to acquire the tools like an education. We need to go out and hunt, if you will, bring home bacon, provide for our families. Those are necessary things. So you can have a nest egg in the afternoon of life, so you don't necessarily have to do that. And what you're saying is the masculine is an outward energy. Males and females alike have masculine, and the morning of life really is a masculine time.
It is. And then it's interesting in the afternoon of life, as we transition, we go into, again, male and female, we really go into this idea of more quiet, more feminine, more solitude, more inward thinking. If you think about, even our grandparents And our parents now are going into this different, we call that really the sunset time or the evening of life, but it's a different energy that we're dealing with.
We have to get there. Let's first, go back to the morning of life and really explore this idea of a masculine outward energy. And it's about providing, it's about safety and security, basic needs, right? You got to have a shelter for yourself
Right.
to withstand the storm. So again, it's not that it's bad. And we want to accumulate a strong, I think of the three little pigs, right? The straw house and the stick house and then the
Right.
brick house.
Right.
And in some ways, it's a very good example of what we do in the morning of life, because we need something to withstand the huff and the puff and the blow your house down.
Yeah, it's funny. When while you're talking, I'm thinking about our energetically in our body. So I do a lot of work, as you know. I do.
Just you and I here.
You know me. As you know, Baruch, I do a lot of work with the chakras. Chakras are energy centers in our bodies. And the first three chakras, your lower root chakra, your mid chakra, right below your belly button, and right here in your solar plexus, are all about the morning of life, because you're building those roots to make sure that you can fly into the afternoon of life, which is higher chakra. It's more spiritual up there. It's more meditative and divine and feminine. But the morning of life is very familiar if you check in with your body. If you don't have a roof over your head and you can't pay your bills, how do you let that go and calm down in order to connect and be more quiet? No, your mind is going to go and go and go. So the morning of life is similar to our chakra system. It's the grounding, it's the rootedness, it's financial, it's the home, it's providing, it's building your career, building your families. It's also in body terms. Like we look at our son who's 18 years old and he spends more time at the gym than anyone I know.
Or anywhere else.
But my husband, you did.
30 years ago.
So, we did that in the morning of life. It's not that we don't take care of ourselves now, but we do it for a different purpose.
But that's a good example. So our son is, bodybuilder, is very into it. And his definition at some base level is power is strength. Physically, how much can you bench? Right? They're all talking about it all day long. I see like these, these boys, it's almost like they're out in the hunting in the, it could have been 1,000 years ago. And they're just talking about different ways of measuring their physical strength.
And then they yell and scream at each other when they can't push again, like one more thing. It's very
primal.
It's
very primal. It's very base. There's nothing wrong with it, especially when you're 18 and really coming into your body and trying to understand what it is. And it's building the brick house. That's powerful. It's having a good job and job security and a partner and having children. You're building physical material foundation and strength. And that is an appropriate way to talk about power. But I guess I start getting into, but that's not authentic power. Why? It's not that it's bad, but to me, at least, authentic is kind of synonymous with true. And true is true before, now, and in the future. True is true under all circumstances. And I just wonder, look at me. I once was a bodybuilder when I was his age, and now I'm not.
You're still handsome.
I'm pretty sure I didn't say anything about anything other than I was a bodybuilder and I had a 6-pack. Now I have a 1-pack. But the bottom line is, was that authentic power when I had 0 body fat, or 2% body fat and big biceps? It can't be completely true because it's gone. And our physical changes and our material possessions change. And if our definition is placed in those things outside of ourselves or even on us that we don't fully control, like our physicality that's always changing, is it truly powerful?
It's a good point. If something, it's like what you said, I think about things that to own your authentic power, what has stayed with you and stayed true your entire life, no matter the phase, right? And yes, our bodies hopefully are here with us, but they are changing. They are going through these phases. I think of somebody who places all their importance on the outside. When you think of your worthiness, I learned at least, and I know a lot of, and I don't want to say men and women, but a lot of people who at a younger age had trauma, had wounds, they placed all of their importance and their self-worth on the outside. So that is very mourning of life. It's unworthiness. It doesn't stick because it's what you think of me makes me feel full.
Yeah, the locus, the focal point is outside of you.
Exactly.
And sometimes you control it and sometimes you don't. What came to my mind was Superman, Christopher Reeves, where we defined Superman, this man of steel. And we know he was a character in the movie, but it was all about this kind of physical outward strength. But then he had his accident and he was paralyzed. And in some ways, Christopher Reeves became more of a Superman after his paralysis.
Right.
He did more world good. He was
Right.
involved with so many worthy causes. He demonstrated a strength or a power
That lies within.
that he didn't have once he was paralyzed at a physical level, but he demonstrated at an emotional, spiritual level. To me, that was like a moment of, wow, that's authentic power. And it's no longer outside, and the circumstances can strip you away of everything from you,
Right.
and yet you're still powerful.
Right. Right. It reminds me of, we talk about old age and getting older, and you always have said, when I get older, I'm still going to be a teacher, a guide. I'm still going to be studying. I'm still going to be learning. And some people, if we flip it to the older, like sunset age, they give up on some of those things. But one of your personal authentic powers, I think, is that as long as I have known you, it's always been learning and guiding and counseling and retrieving information.
When you're talking about that, I think about the Jewish experience throughout history. And for me, it comes from that. We all inherit our generational baggage, positive and negative. One of the things that I've always believed that I've inherited that is beyond good from the Jewish idea is that they can take everything from you. We've been kicked out of every country we ever lived in, except this one, Canada, a few others. And the idea was, but they can never take our knowledge. And so Jews aren't smarter than average Americans, but our college rate is something like 90% of Jews go to college. It isn't because we're better or smarter, it's because we learned culturally and generationally, they will take everything from you, but they will never take your knowledge. So accumulate knowledge, that's power.
That is that. I mean, I see that that's what you've been accumulating your entire life, has been this hunger for knowledge. It reminds me of Viktor Frankl, who was in the Holocaust, and we've talked about this before, is like his outer circumstances changed so much, but he always said the one thing that they can't take from me is my soul, is innately who I am. And so as we shift into talking about the afternoon of life, we think about like, who were you as a young person? Think about those things that had nothing to do with the outside.
Right.
That is your authentic power.
Right.
And I always, when I work with clients, I always say, like, pick 3 or 4 things that you felt was just like when you did it or when you acted upon it, you were in your knowing. That is authentic power, is to be in your knowing. And it starts when you're in the morning of life, but then life compiles and we're not always able to hold on to that. So as we shift into the afternoon of life, we are I feel like it's this transformation, like a cocoon. We're in this cocoon in the morning of life, and we're growing and we're eating and we're gathering information and figuring out who we are. And then the afternoon of life comes and we become this. It's a transition to the butterfly.
Right. And there's something in the caterpillar and the butterfly that's the same, the common thread. I call it the soul thread. And when I work with clients, we oftentimes find their soul thread. What was true when you were 4, was true when you were 14, was true when you were 44, was true when you're 84, because true is true is true. 2 + 2 always equals 4.
Right.
And, like looking at our son, right now, he thinks he's putting his power into his biceps, but what he'll find as he hits late 40s, is that what's driving him to do that is the truth. Right. And it was the truth when he was 2, and he saw something he wanted, and
And he went for it.
he put his attention on it to acquire it. He's doing that with bodybuilding. I hope someday he'll be doing it also with, his inner quest, and he does it too, to his fairness. But the point though is there's a soul thread in there. It's manifesting in different ways at different times in our life.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I think about myself. When I was younger, my dad would drag us camping and hiking, and I would go. But I did love it. I mean, my sister and my mom hated it, but there was something so magical about being in the woods for me. It was freeing. It was like the combination of this music and the woods and the animals and nature and all of it. I mean, even to talk about it makes me like want to tear up because I want to go. I want to go to the mountains.
Watch our last video. We got a trailer because of that man, Jim. Thanks a lot, Jim, for that.
That's why we got a trailer. So it's still true. That is one of my soul threads. It's the animals, nature, and music, all that my dad gave me. And it's still true today that is a piece of me. And it's cultivated more in the afternoon of life. Why? Because I'm more in my authentic power.
And you own that, right? I'm working with an individual right now who's going through a very difficult divorce. And one of the things that I see with people who are going through on the other side of divorce is they feel like it's all gone, right? And same is true with death. And what I'm doing with him right now is finding the soul thread that was there before, that was there during the marriage, that now is there in the dissolution of the marriage, that will be there. What is the soul thread? Because when you can find what's true, right? Yes, the marriage is now dissolved, but there was love that's true. There are memories that are true. These values were true. They're still true. They're just not being expressed now in your marriage.
Right.
And we have to hold on to what is true to get us through the storms.
Right.
And so helping myself find that thread, it's almost like I see it as a lifeline that we need to turn to when the external world starts to change, starts to become tumultuous. COVID comes, economics come, whatever the circumstances, right? If you can hold tight to a soul thread, you can weather this storm.
It's true. It's very true. I think about I hate this word, but everyone talks about a midlife crisis. And if you, stop. He like totally broke up my concentration. Okay. Anyways, the phrase midlife crisis. It's really hard sometimes to work with your husband.
Plus, I'm an Enneagram 8, so I'm a jokester sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so I looked up online because, we on our website and what we kind of like, our message is all about the afternoon of life, but we don't talk about midlife crisis. But if you look up on Google, you're going to just find all these things on midlife crisis. You're unfulfilled in your work path, your marriage is falling apart, your spouse or your parent is dying, you name it, everything is falling apart. So what I like to call it is a midlife transition. Right? It's this transition from the morning of life to the afternoon of life. Now, see, you made me lose my train of thought.
No, you're doing great.
Okay, wait, I'm not done. Oh. So the transition is going from, it's not a breakdown, although we've had moments of breakdown. It's not a breakdown. It's becoming, it's a becoming who you are and figuring out what your story is. So to bring it back to what you said in terms of your soul thread, which I really like, is I look at it as what's your story? And in the afternoon of life, you have all these external compounding things. Also in your body, for women, we go through menopause, such a big change in our bodies. All of these things are compounding upon us. And the one thing we need to remember to feel and to learn about our authentic power is to stand in your story. Your story is compiled of your entire being. Now, some of your story are the wounds and the crap of life, right? All of that stuff is compiling on you. All the ways in which in the morning of life that you chose outward living, it's all going to crumble. So your story is that thread, And it's the stuff you've compiled along the way. And the afternoon of life comes along, and you have to look at your story and you have to say, this doesn't fit in my story anymore.
Right.
This, my nature stuff, that's totally in my story. But unworthiness, no, that's no longer in my story.
So let me give you an example. It's very powerful and personal to somebody I'm working with who is having a hysterectomy, which is obviously a common procedure for women. And we've been talking a lot about, the morning of life defines women oftentimes as life givers, right? That's what it means to bear a child. And you have a womb that provides for that. I don't have as a man. And so you're defined outwardly by what comes through the womb and giving life. And now that we're talking about she's returning the womb in many ways, the physical womb to the earth, because in the afternoon of life, it's no longer how she bears life. She's still a life bearer.
Right.
She's still bringing forth life. It's no longer in this kind of explicitly physical capacity. And it's been a process of transitioning for her from this outward defined power, nothing more powerful than bringing forth physical life.
Right.
And that's gone. And if you only define yourself by the external circumstances, then the power's gone. But what we've been doing is helping her take back her power and saying, but you are a life giver, a life bringer, a life bearer. Now we're manifesting that in different ways. That's yours. And no physical anything can ever define that for you or take that away from you.
Right.
And she's growing in power.
Right.
Because of this shift that you're talking about, taking back her power from external circumstances, in this case, her physical womb, and taking back the essence of that power and now manifesting it in different ways.
That's great. That's interesting.
It's powerful.
I think it is. I mean, I think it's this idea of like what you're saying about this woman is she has to find her worthiness somewhere inside of her that has nothing to do with what life is demanding of her.
Well, also because of the women who are in the morning of life who aren't able to bear children physically, right? You still have the power of life within you. I've worked with a lot of women and couples who haven't been biologically been able to bring forth children, but their parents, sometimes they adopt and they're parents in that way. Sometimes they adopt causes or devote themselves to other people and they're parenting in that capacity. That's their power.
Right.
It happens to be that physically, right, they're not able to find it out in the physical world. They're able to find it in themselves, and that's theirs.
So I would take it another step, and I would say part of the afternoon of life is one of the aspects of the afternoon of life. Now we're in our late 40s, so we still have children at home. There's different phases of the afternoon of life. But even though we have a busy household, we still have found the importance of slowing down or trying to, and finding quiet, meditative space. And so part of like what I want to talk about with your client is, yes, we don't all get to be parents, but part of that shift and transition to the afternoon of life is to become your own parent.
Right.
And I also had a woman who could not bear children. And in the afternoon of life, she just finally grieved that. And what we came to is that there are many children inside her womb. They're just not physically coming out. They are her children. It's her 5-year-old little self. It's her 11-year-old self. It's her 20-year-old self. And you get to mother yourself, to stand in your story, to stand in that power. You get to now reparent yourself in the afternoon of life. In our morning of life, we're growing up. We're babies. As we head, especially as you head into your 50s, 60s, 70s, you get this opportunity to reparent, to own your part of the story by saying, those things hurt me. Those things were hard. And now I have to be responsible for me.
And the shift between the morning of life and the afternoon of life, it doesn't matter what physical or thing we're talking about. For lots of people, it's about profession, right? For other people, it's about hobbies, activities, and you can do less and less and less of those. Those things start to disappear and dissipate. You get to a point where you're not going to be weightlifting. You're not going to be jogging. Maybe you're 90, whatever it might be. doesn't mean you can't still express whatever was underneath that. And in many ways, you get to go to the authenticity of it. So for example, I'm working with somebody who's shifting in their sexuality. They're right now, they just don't feel like they did when they were 20 something. They're now 60 something. And we're talking about, but there's a blessing in that too, because they're starting to utilize other parts of their being to relate to the opposite sex in ways they never did when they were 20. And they're growing deeper in their relationships in many ways because their biology, their hormones are settling and changing.
Right.
And there are gifts when the outside world starts to settle down, starts to let go. We start to let go of it. We can
Right.
move into what was underneath it all along, which is authentic power.
Totally. I love that story. I think it's the freedom to express yourself.
Also, the Morning of Life Society marketing tells him he's less than,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not where he is anymore. They tell him, they give him products to defy that.
Right.
And then you're always trying to be in the morning of life. That's what Jung meant. If you try and live like the morning of life, like in the afternoon of life, you'll do destruction. I said to him, it's time to be a grandpa.
Right.
It doesn't mean grandpas can't have fun. It does mean that you must start defining yourself as more than just only those old ways of relating.
Well, I think this is where there's so much healing to be done in the afternoon of life. If you think about all the ways in which you've grown up in the morning of life, and then you hit the afternoon, that's why people go through the midlife crisis, because at some point, all of your stuff is going to rush in, whether it is, the external circumstances, whether it's a death or it's a change in relationship or it's an illness. Something is going to shift you. Maybe your kids left for college and you're an empty nester. There's a pivotal moment in the afternoon of life where everything changes. And it's an opportunity, like you said, to honor who you are, but to heal from being human. If you've lived on this earth for 50, 60, 70 years, you've gathered a lot of physicalities. This is our school.
Mhm.
This is our education. And we've been in school for 50 years, 60 years. So the opportunity now is to, what I always talk about is to feel that junk that you've swept under the rug for 50 years. It's to heal your wounds. It's to feel your emotions. It's to heal your relationships. It's to forgive. It's to surrender.
And that means taking back your power, taking it back from things, taking it back from relationships, right?
Mhm.
Taking it back from anything and everything outside of yourself, because if it's outside of you, you don't own it. This was Viktor Frankl's thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And what he said was, and this is why I'm a logotherapist and I follow him passionately, you can be powerful until your dying breath. You get to choose how to respond, even in the dying moments. And up until that, and probably beyond,
Mhm.
that's power. Nobody can take that away from you.
I agree.
There's a little story I want to wrap up with on my side, and that is, I forget the rabbi, but she went to visit her grandmother. Maybe you remember the story, in a nursing home. And her grandmother gave her a little handkerchief, a little scarf, she wanted to be her granddaughter, the rabbi, to remember her. And at first blush, the granddaughter thought, it's so sad. This is all she had left. Once she had a big house full of stuff, and then she had an apartment full of stuff, and then she had a assisted living full of stuff, and then she had a nursing home full of stuff, and then in this nursing home she had a little corner of stuff, and this was all that was left. And oh, it's so sad. But when she took hold of that handkerchief, she felt the power that handkerchief was her grandmother's.
Mm.
And it represented nothing could be stripped from her grandmother. This represented power that all of those things around never really did. And in that exchange, she received authentic power. And that's what I want to live like. And I think that's what you want to, and our listeners want to live like, with that kind of power.
Absolutely. It reminds me of a story from your grandmother. It's something that happened between your grandmother and Maya, our daughter. So his grandmother was full of life.
Grandma Flo.
Grandma Flo, always full of life, always dancing, always singing, always happy, always doing dishes, always doing for somebody else. And then slowly, she had a stroke, and then she went into more of an assisted living, and everything dwindled. She didn't care. She didn't, I mean, at that point after her stroke, she was always happy.
She lost her words.
She couldn't even form full sentences, and she was cheeking her meds as well. She was great.
She was proud of that.
It's hysterical. Anyways, that's not part of the story. But what happened was, and I don't even think you know this, but she was in her assisted living. It was probably 6 months, a year before she passed, and she handed our daughter Maya a deck of cards, and it was like a deck of cards. Like, she could have handed something really valuable, but she handed Maya the deck of cards, and she said, "This is from me." And I'm sure it's lost by now, but I remember we moved to Israel, and we were in Israel at the time, and we flew back, and Maya was like, I need to hold on to my deck of cards. That's Bobby's, that's Grandma Flo's. And every so often, every couple months, she would remember that she had it. And it was just a deck of cards, but it was like this piece of her that she took with her. And it was a remembering of Grandma Flo's memory of, like, Grandma Flo's authentic power was pure joy, pure authentic joy. And you know what? It's so funny I'm saying Maya, because that's kind of our daughter, is that Maya came out as joyful, and she's a teenager. It's a little bit crazy.
She's still having fun. We're not.
I know that she'll come back to it one day, but that's who Maya is, and that's her authentic power. And she took that from her grandmother.
And when you're in the presence of somebody who's owned their power, because they can give you a handkerchief, they can give you a deck of cards, they can give you a look, and you have just received something that is theirs and can never be taken from them. And that's the point. And that's why we created Own Your Power.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Own Your Power. So just to dive in a little bit more, Own Your Power is a 7-day program, complimentary, that we offer just by hopping on our website, the front page, www.mysoulcenter.org. And he usually makes fun of me because I say www. And it's what we're doing is, in this new year, we really don't believe in resolutions. We believe in execution and evolution. And we want to help you to hone in on your authentic power and who you are in the craziness of life, whether it's pandemic or not. So we have created Own Your Power Immersion, which starts on January 18th. And it is a 7-day, it's using that 7-day program, but we do it with you. So we are on Facebook Live every day at 12 p.m. Mountain Time at our new Soul Centered Community Facebook group. So hop on if you haven't done that yet, and you can join us. We're giving away gifts. We have great books and meditations that we're giving away. We want to hear from you, and we're creating a community, a new community. So just hop on over to our website. You can get that information, or you can look us up on Facebook.
And so that's what we're up to. That's just a taste of what we do. We work with clients from there. So start there, see what resonates with you, reach out to us, shoot us an email at info@mysoulcenter.org, and we will see you or talk to you on the next podcast.
Yes. Namaste, everyone.
Shalom. Peace.
Bye.